Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to our seventh webinar. This webinar is organized under the FEIST project. Thank you very much for being with us today. So today we will be talking about 3D printing in the footwear industry. We will explore the different applications on the footwear industry, leather goods, and also the business models. My name is Florbela Silva. I'm the head of innovation and digital manufacturing at CTCP, and I hope you enjoy. So today's webinar, we have two speakers. We have the pleasure to have Nicolene from Futurology, where she will be talking with us about the applications and business models. And after that, we will have the pleasure to have Pedro Duarte from CTCP, my colleague, that will show some examples as well, comparing traditional companies that adopted 3D printing and also new companies that were created focused on the 3D printed products. So yeah, I hope you enjoy. If you have any questions, just type on the chat. You can either type in English or in Portuguese. We will translate. Don't worry with that. And yeah, good webinar. Nicolene, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Florbela. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you to the CTCP for inviting me. So I'm very excited, actually, for this particular webinar. Also because I think it's really important that in the shoe industry, we start understanding more about 3D printing and understanding how we can apply that. What I would first like to do before I introduce myself further is that I would really love to know from the audience what your experience is with 3D printing. So you can type it in the chat where I can also see it. Again, also if it's in Portuguese, I do think that I can read it. And I would also love to know if there are specific things that you would like me to speak about in the webinar so that I can focus. I can be very flexible here. My goal is to give you a really practical insight in where the technology is now, what different applications we have, and also, of course, costs and business models involved in that. Now, my name is Nico. I am Dutch, but my company is now in Barcelona, so fairly close to you guys in Spain. We have a big lab here. You might be surprised to see me sitting behind a knitting machine when we're talking about printing, but I can show you maybe, let's see if I move it up. Further down in the back is my printing lab. And we might quickly do a tour if we have time in this presentation. It's just that we have a big course going on. So we have 7 different people, mainly startups, that are experimenting actually for 2 weeks with us on how to develop not prototypes, but actual wearable printed shoes that can be made on demand. It's a bit noisy because all our printers are on. So should you hear any background noise, then you know why this is happening, but that's also why I'm sitting here. So I have been, well, in the footwear industry for more than 30 years already. Started more from the trend forecasting side, but I have a background in engineering. I'm a trained engineer for apparel technology. And I was always very interested in the technological side. And around 2001 was my first encounter with 3D printing. And this was when I was working for Timberland in the United States. And they told me on one of my first days there that they had a 3D printer. And I had absolutely no idea, of course, at that time what that was. The whole idea of even being able to create something in 3D out of a printer, of course, was very new. But it captivated me right away. So basically from that time onwards, I have been educating myself in 3D printing, doing a lot of 3D printing. And then in 2011, I started printing with flexible materials with the purpose of making fully wearable shoes, not prototypes. So I think I'd be one of the people that has most experience in actual 3D printing of wearable shoes. And I would love to share a lot of that experience also with you today. Because I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding still about 3D printing, what it can and cannot do, what you might like to use it for, what costs are. So I'd like to take you through a little bit of history, but also very current things to help you understand from your perspective what you might be able to do with 3D printing in the industry. And as I understand it, there are several among you that are manufacturers. So I am going to focus very much also on the industrial perspective. So say that you as a company wanted to start producing footwear with a printer. What should you think about? Which different technologies are there? What could be different business models that we talk about? Because I honestly think it's not so much a technology that is holding us back, but it's actually a different business model that is related to printing that we need to start thinking about. Now, let me open with something that I also open with whenever I give training. So here at Footwearology, what we do is we do R&D. So we develop new printers, actually, with machine companies. A lot of companies that are our partners. So that can be from WASP to FLSun to indeed HP, Stratasys, all different technologies we collaborate with to help them create better applications for footwear. We work together with material suppliers. Recreus, that you might know, is a big one that makes filaments and pallets for printing. With them, we also work on how to optimize the combination between the machine and the material and how we can really create good shoes with those. Then, apart from our own R&D, we are in-house. We are really developing new ways of how can we make shoes local, on demand, automated, with automated software using AI. All of that we research here internally. So it's a lot of internal research that we do, as well as consulting. So we consult with companies on a very broad level. So from machine companies to manufacturers to brands that want to understand how to work with 3D printing. And we also do the opposite, where we work with 3D printing companies that want to understand how they make better machines for footwear. So yesterday, for instance, I was at a new presentation from a printer by Ultimaker. It's one of the first printers that is industrial for flexible filaments. And yeah, we have been basically consulting with them, I don't know, since 2015, 16, to be able to make stuff like this happen. As you all know, to invent new industrial processes always takes a lot of time. And then we do education. So we teach people here internally, all footwear professionals, so not so much students from a university or a school. We really focus on professionals that want to understand how to make footwear in an automated process, local, and we do knitting, printing, and molding, and robotics that combine all of that. So it's another thing I will address in my talk, because I think that molding and printing are not competing technologies. These are technologies that can be combined. And I think this is especially interesting for you guys coming from an industrial background. Now, let me start with a shoe that I always show when I start any type of course around printing. And that is this one. This is actually not a printed shoe at all. This is a molded shoe. But I always show it from the perspective of, if you start to 3D print footwear, you need to design for it. So people will come in and ask me, oh, can you 3D print an Air Jordan, a Converse, whichever known shoe that is made with traditional technology? Technically, I could say yes, but people have to understand that it would look somewhat like this. I mean, we're creating shells basically in 3D printing. We're not stitching together different materials, very different compositions. So printing requires a different way of designing. Also, it's not just a different way of manufacturing, it's a different way of designing, as well as a different way of doing business. That brings me to the next example that I wanted to show you. So instead of going through a lot of slides today, what I want to do is to show you guys a whole series of printed shoes that have been made with many different technologies to help you understand where the technology is, what pitfalls we have, and what cost and business models we could be looking at. This shoe, I hold it up close, is one of the first 3D printed shoes ever made. Not the first, but one of the first. Was by a brand called Feet out of the United States in San Diego. This was around 2014, so that's now 10 years ago. What was interesting is that this company was not started by footwear people. And that's actually also something that I do see in printing a lot. Because the issue is, if you come from the footwear industry and you have an idea in your mind on how shoes are supposed to be made, you're going to struggle sometimes with printing. Because you are trying to apply ideas and technologies that you have in your brain of how things are supposed to happen to a technology that works differently. So what was interesting here is that these people that started the company were mathematicians. They were actually not shoe people at all. But it was a couple, husband and wife. And the wife had a problem that her heel is quite narrow and her forefoot is very wide. So she was not able to fit regular shoes. And she was not like an orthopedic footwear patient, basically. She had normal feet, no issues on the foot. It's just a different shape. So she started thinking there needs to be another way to create shoes for me. And that's how they started. And they did it big time. They had like 200 printers in a room, big place in San Diego. And we helped them optimize this. And their idea was, let's make shoes custom to size for everybody, and let's make them in store. And at the time, that was really still too early. And there are also some pitfalls in there that I would like to talk about already now. When we're talking about 3D printing, indeed, the advantages are that we can do things completely custom to size, custom to aesthetic. I mean, we don't necessarily have to make molds. We can do a lot of things that you would not be able to do with serial manufacturing, with mass manufacturing. At the same time, we do want to make a shoe that's commercial, that can be affordable, that can be made within a reasonable time frame. So one of the reasons why Feet, for instance, did not survive is also because they really wanted to produce in store with the idea of people can wait for their shoes to be ready or they come back the next day. But making the shoe like this at the time with printers, so this was one type of printer making the top, another type of printer making the bottom, and then they still stitched in a textile because it was more comfortable still for the foot. That altogether still took anywhere between 24 and 48 hours at the time. That would now be different, but at the time. So if you're then thinking about people coming into your shop, they're not going to be waiting for it. So then, because that's 24 to 48 hours. Also, of course, if you want to produce something in your store and you want to have people come in for that, you need to start running your company like a hairdressing salon. Basically, people need to make an appointment. And that's something that, of course, is very new in our industry. I remember years ago being at a Desma house fair for Desma, the big molding company, and they had a custom shoe project for molding that you could indeed come in, have your foot scanned, have your shoe made to size. But at the event, there were 250 people at the same time trying to get their foot scanned, the shoe made, all of that. It didn't work. It takes a lot of planning. And you can also still wonder, is it really necessary that we start doing that? Is it necessary that people want to see the production in the store? Or is it just that they can come to the store to feel the shoes, to try the shoes on, and then the production can be done elsewhere? Because also what was interesting is one of my main learning moments for 3D printing. What was interesting with these shoes, these are made with filaments on what we call an FDM printer. So it's essentially this type of string material here that goes inside a printer, is being melted and then extruded out to a plate. We can see that later. Oh, a second. Yeah, sorry, lost my train of thought. So what was happening at the time is that you had these printers, and that of course takes a lot of time. But what was most interesting is that their thought was, okay, if we produce something custom to size, like they would do in the orthopedic industry, this is going to help a lot of people. And if we scan the foot and we make the shoe based upon that, that shoe is going to fit really well. But no. So we produced the shoes, sent out the first round, and a very large percentage were sent back. People saying, no, this is uncomfortable. But the responses were all different. If you would say, okay, all my consumers saying this is too small, then you've maybe done something wrong in your calculation. But for each consumer, it was different. I think the front is too tight and the back is too wide, or the other way around. So what you indeed would want to do, and I still don't see that happening, is that if you want to start doing things custom to size, regardless of whatever printing method you use, if you want to do custom, make sure that you have your right consumer information. It's still one of the biggest missing things. Why? Because people assume that if something fits around the foot, that people will find that comfortable. And that's not true. People have a different perception of what comfort is. I have a lot of shoes that were made to my size in leather, find them all super uncomfortable. Why? Because I prefer to wear my shoes too large. Actually, I like shoes to feel loose. But another person might feel the exact opposite way. So one of the things that the industry would need to start thinking about is, how do we get the right information? And the right information is not just what is my foot size, it's also what is my preference for wearing. If you live in an Asian country or any other country where you have to kick off your shoes at the door, you probably want your shoes to fit a bit larger than in other countries where you can maybe wear your shoes in the house. So all these things you need to take into account, because otherwise, I see it a lot here, people come to 3D printing with the best intentions. I want to do custom, I want to do on demand, I want to do in store, I want to do local. All of those are very relevant things for 3D printing, and they can all work, but only if you have the right data, the right information, and really understand the different business models related to different types of printing. Now, one of the things that I would like to get into a little bit more today is that, first of all, of course, there's not right consumer information. Good. Okay, I have a really good question here from Irene. So she says, hi, what do you mean with right consumer information? Doing custom, people often cannot articulate what they want. Very true. Do you recommend creating a trial fitting sleeve? No, actually, I do not. This is what you would probably do in the orthopedic industry. However, if we have to do that, it makes things way more expensive. What I am always really surprised at, and I do a lot of consulting also for companies that do foot scanning apps, is that all the attention goes to the foot, not to the shoe that these people are already wearing. So without necessarily having to ask a consumer, do you like A, B, C, or D, which they usually do not know how to communicate, you could, for instance, say, well, I'm scanning the foot, and let me also scan the shoe. Because then you can at least see, okay, this is the foot, and this is the shoe that they came in wearing. If you ask somebody, please wear a shoe that's very comfortable to you, you can compare the foot scan to how their current shoe fits. And then you can already see how that is. You can also analyze, even if you don't have a pressure plate, from the abrasion on the sole, how somebody is walking. How are they doing things? You could, even though people find it unpleasant, you could, for instance, also think about taking their weight when they come in. With printing, we do everything basically with lattices or infills. So say that I have a printed shoe, the inside usually is like a grid, like a open mesh. And I am a quite big person, so I would need a very different density here than, I don't know, somebody who's in Japan and who is small and slim and would have something else. So I feel that at this moment people are indeed not collecting the right information, and it would not necessarily be I have to ask my customer, because if you ask, you usually don't get the answer, because they only see it from experience, that they're like, oh, when I wear it, that's when I feel if I like it or not. So indeed, also recording the footwear that they actually wear can already be a really good one. So, or trying to show the shoes on them, what it would look like, for instance, through AR. There are so many new things now that we can do, where also in terms of custom, which is great for 3D printing, but custom is, in my opinion, not, okay, let's ask the consumer what shoe they want, because a consumer is not a designer. So usually a consumer would like to see a selection of things, then they can choose, go like, okay, I like this one better than the other one because something, and then maybe do minor tweaks. But so far, all the companies that have done full-on custom, where the consumer would design the whole shoe, have failed, because consumers are not designers. So it's something really important to keep in mind. So, and especially new technologies that we have now could really solve that, where we could do algorithmic design, create things for people based upon their taste, take a picture of their closets of the other shoes they already have. So it's more that people are not, whenever they do anything custom, they're not required to give that type of information. They're not required to scan the shoes. They're not required to send a picture of the shoes. They're not required to send an overview of what wardrobe they have. And I think in the future that will definitely happen. So this company no longer exists. So we're skipping to quite a few years actually from here, because this was 2014. Company eventually went bust because they could not get enough income. And at this point, making a shoe like this with the printers that they had at the time would still be around 24 to 48 hours, depending on how large your shoe is. So, of course, in our industry where we work with molds, that sounds like insanely long, because once we have the mold, it could be a few seconds when you have your shoe. I'll talk about printed molds in a bit. But now we are actually doing a lot better. We have made in the past 10 years a really big jump. And the first thing I want to explain is that when we look at printing, essentially there's division between three bigger types of technology. And there's a really large price difference between them. So each of them is actually for a very different type of business. So on the one hand, we have printers that work with filament, like I just showed you. So this plastic that is melted down, and you put it on a plate layer by layer. Or what we do a lot more now, it's like this, pellets. A lot of you making soles, for instance, will recognize this stuff. It's granules. And a lot of times it's also the same granules that we use actually for sole molding. And these printers that work with this type of thermoplastic, that plastic that melts and you deposit it in a layer, are usually cheaper printers. So, I mean, when I started, a printer was still almost €1,000. Now, our most basic printer, which is a good printer that I can print fully wearable shoes on, is €160. So, for one, it's not a printer that I would use for the industry. But we have printers that you can use for the industry that are around €700-800. That's, of course, very cheap. And then you have more sturdy machines that are a little bit more advanced and, for instance, work with multiple materials, where they're around 20 to 23,000 per machine. That might sound a little bit expensive, the last ones, but these are then fast machines that can produce a lot, that can continually work 24 hours. Now, the other side of printing, you essentially have two methods. One is with resin, so with a liquid resin, and one that works with a powder, and then that powder is bound together either with laser or with a plastic binder. I'll show you an example. This, for instance, is a shoe made with resin. And as you can see, beautiful, smooth texture, beautiful openings. People also have to realize with both the powder and the resin methods that there's a reason why the shoes look like this, so open. Because if you were to print these shoes closed, say that I want to make with resin a shoe like this, heavy. It's much heavier material. We need to understand that the powder and the resin are not foam-like materials. So we, of course, from the industry know these lightweight shoes that are EVA or ETPU or stuff like that. Lightweight. This is not lightweight. So you have to have these open structures, things like this that we call a lattice, openings in the upper, because if you were to design these shoes solid, they are very heavy. You will still find lots of designers also online that do that, but it's very heavy. Now, this is the resin one. Let me quickly show you something. See where those are, which is powder. I don't have a full shoe. Powder, you will probably know from what we call lattices. So these open structures that behave like a foam. It's essentially the replacement of a foam by a printed mechanical grid that has a certain function. So this can be lightweight and bouncy. Now, when we look at machines for printing with resin or with powder, that's a very different price. The powder is definitely the most expensive one. So there we're talking about machines for the really professional use, over 200,000 for sure, 200,000 up to 350,000. And then you still also need machines that will remove the powder, and that can be several steps. We have a factory here from Hewlett Packard in Barcelona where they do exactly this type of printing, and it's multiple steps. Now, of course, in order to pay back the cost for such expensive machinery, you need to make a lot of quantity. So that's another reason why actually we don't see it that much yet, because people need to understand that if you design for this, you need to design in a way that I can put as many shoes together inside in one go in the trunk, in the machine, to get my, oh, there's even powder falling on my laptop as I do this, to make sure that everything fits in the machine. So, and that we can do a lot of quantity. So this is more indeed suited for companies that make a lot of quantity, that want to maybe combine this with molded parts. Because if you don't do quantity, this is too expensive. So even for the luxury segment, you should think about, if we make, say that I make a shoe like this, which is actually made with filament, but in this technology, if I cannot put other articles inside this thing while I'm printing, this is going to cost me, depending on what printer I have, anywhere from 200-300 to 600 euros cost per shoe. So that is why. Are there 3D printers that work with EVA? No. But I will get to that. Yes, no. So on the powder side and the resin side, for sure not. So I will show you also this. So this is with a resin. These printers are coming down in price very fast. You guys might know the carbon 3D printers. They were exclusive for Adidas in the footwear industry for a while because Adidas was partially owner. Now they are no longer, and people can do this. This is actually from a company in China called Polypolymer. This is from a small design company called Ika and Kostika. And these are about $70 per pair. A lot of times with the resin printing or with the powder printing, it's not so much for a consumer for a company to own a single one machine. You essentially want to have a big print farm with multiple machines, and then you produce for others, and then the prices come down. The prices for resin are coming down the fastest at this moment. So if you're looking for industrial production, you want to do things quite high end, then you could look at this. Of course, compared to other costs that we have in the industry, 70 USD cost per pair for a simple pair is still relatively high. Now, asking indeed the question about EVA is a really good question. what you essentially want when you ask EVA is to have a lightweight, foamy type material. What we have now, skips a little bit ahead, but I will revert. This is a new material. It's called VilaFlex Foamy. This is a TPU, and it has a foaming agent in it. So it does essentially what EVA also does, it expands. So when we use a material like this, what you have is actually better than EVA, because since it's a TPU, we can remelt this. And an EVA is a non-thermoplastic. It's a thermostatic plastic. So it essentially cannot be remelted. EVA, we always have to chop up and then mix with a binder to recycle. So we see a lot of efforts, both in the molding industry as well as in the printing industry, to create TPUs that are foamy and lightweight. So, and that's actually happening. The materials are still relatively expensive, but you can work with them really fast, because as you might remember, when I was talking about this shoe way in the beginning, it's also TPU, but this was 2014 and it was 24 to 48 hours. We printed this one here this week within 6 hours. And we are working on a project with Fused, one of the companies that I'll show you in a bit, where we are making barefoot shoes within 3 hours on printers. And if that happens, that's when we can talk indeed much more commercial. So EVA, no, but foaming TPU, yes. So in terms of having a foamy consistency that's comparable to EVA, this is also a very lightweight shoe. Interesting also for you to know, if you want EVA, I just had a great meeting with HP last week, also again for the lattices, because this is something that you don't make on a printer that does filament or pellets. It's not possible to make something like this. And they now have new lamps in their machines that, okay, I will explain what FDM is. I wanted to go back to, so in the powder side, what they have now is with new inks and new types of lights that they have in the machine, you will start seeing things like this that are lightweight, so like a foam, but are less powdery. I will go over some of the questions that I see here already in between. So FDM means filament depositing method, essentially. And this is the method where you have a printer and it melts either pellets or it melts indeed the filament into a nozzle, and then layer by layer by layer you build that up. Technically, we think that this is a slow method of printing, but by now with the new printers, and I can give you a quick tour later, this is actually going a lot faster. So this shoe has been made with what we call FDM, so with filament deposited like this within 6 hours. So that's actually really fast. Let me quickly look at the question above. We've noticed that the industry is currently loves men's sneakers or Crocs tag. Yeah, slip-on shoes. Can we use 3D printing to create a fashion pump that fits and feels similar to a leather pump if you want to make one? What is the tolerance for error in execution caused by material? It's a very technical question. It'll take me longer. How is consistency maintained in small batches in various sizes? So in short, again, the answer is yes and no. So indeed, I agree with you that we see a lot of these slip-on molded shoes. What is actually funny, I have one here. This is like a slip-on molded shoe. Quite funny, because here this is Adidas. They tried to copy the look of a 3D printer. This is not printed, this is molded. But the different lines and even the little fingerprint from the printer are copied in this. So yes, we see a lot of this. This is indeed even inspired by printing. So can we print it? Yes. However, when you say pump and you mean high heel, that's more difficult, because we will still have to have what do you call it? A shank in there and a pin, maybe metal pin for the heel, because it's not, the material is very suitable for sneaker-like things, but it's not suitable for high heels without addition. So yes, there are rigid plastics. They're not strong enough. They will not necessarily feel similar to leather pump either. So that's still something that you would have to think about. No, this does not feel similar to leather. So in general, my advice is always do not try to start from an existing shoe, like, okay, here we have a leather pump, and now we start printing that, because you will be really unsuccessful, because it will look like a cheap takedown of a good high heel shoe. You would have to think the opposite way. If I wanted to make a high heel with printing, what could it look like? And then lose your thoughts about what leather is and how that's supposed to look or feel, because no, these are all plastics. They do not and will not feel the same. Does not mean that this will necessarily be more uncomfortable. It just does not feel the same. It does not look the same. So we have to design from a different perspective there. So tolerance for error in execution caused by material. I can answer all of those questions, but this is highly technical. So if you do not know anything yet about printing, what print you have and what you want to do, then I would not answer that question for now. Essentially, can we make things consistent? Yes, actually quite well in printing, but it will take some time to get your settings right. And that also actually asks me, indeed, is the 3D printer good for development of high heels? Again, yes and no. So what I think is really interesting for high heels, actually I don't have one around me at the moment, but what you have to understand there is that what is interesting about the high heels is that we could create shapes that are much more, we call it optimized for topology. So they are much more ergonomic. So even though it could be really elegant shape, it's much more based upon the weight of the body, the shape of the foot, all that we can do. For the strength, we generally still need some more traditional elements. So what you could think of for a high heel is to say, okay, I'm going to still take my metal pin that I always have in a heel, but my cover is 3D printed. So software to use is actually an interesting question in general. So what we find in 3D printing is that you want to use indeed 3D modeling software. So things like Rhino or Blender are softwares that you would use there. Why? Because when I am printing a shoe, I don't necessarily have the distinction between the upper and bottom. So this, by the way, is a printed last, which is also something that you can use. It's a functional last. This one is a very strong one, printed in a very fancy filament here. But what you normally, we would say, okay, there's a bottom and there's an upper. We essentially create everything all around the last. So a lot of the traditional softwares, I don't know, Romans, CAD, things like that, are not so suitable for printing. What could be interesting for those of you interested, we are doing some research with iCAD 3D Plus. They have some functions also that are much more interesting for 3D printing, because 3D printing, you essentially think in structures, in texture, in extrusion around your last. So can you do heels? Yes. Will you have to have technology, traditional technology involved in that as well? Also, yes. So 3 hours to print the blue shoe on FDM. Yeah, so well, 3 hours to print, not this blue shoe. This is 6 hours. But there's a very simple barefoot shoe that we work on. That's 3 hours indeed. That's on the Ethel Sun. I can show you that later. We have that printer in house on a 60 millimeter per second speed with a foamy 95A. For those of you that are far enough in the technology. What I really want to show as a really good thought experiment and an example for you guys, this is a shoe made by Zellerfeld. I don't know if you know Zellerfeld as a brand. If not, I can actually quickly share my screen also in a bit. Let me hold it close to my camera. You can see that this is almost like a knit. And this is also a very soft shoe. This is really soft and very comfortable. So this company is one of the first companies that really produces 3D printed shoes at scale in their own print farm in Hamburg. It's in Germany. It's a very inspiring example for you. And the same counts for this company. It's called Fused Footwear. It's a company that we also work with a lot. You can see here that this texture is a bit more coarse, but also still all very soft, functional, flexible. Same for this. This is also printed in FDM with filaments. I wear these shoes, by the way. This has been worn for over a year, and you can see that it's still in really good shape. A lot of people ask, how do they last? Well, it's almost all TPU. So TPU, as we know, is high anti-abrasion, has anti-abrasion resistance. So this is actually very strong. And what you see essentially here are two different strategies of printing. This one is printed with what we call a very small nozzle, so a really fine machine, really thin layers, and therefore takes quite a long time to print. So here we are talking about anywhere, depending on what the size is and the model is, still anywhere between 25 to 50 hours, if not more, for each shoe. Of course, that's quite a lot. Then this is also a fully wearable shoe, very lightweight. It's printed with a 1.2 millimeter nozzle, so much thicker layers. And this designer actually uses the idea that you see those lines as a design element. But these shoes are all under 10 hours of printing. These are selling for around, say, 145 to 180 US dollars. And these are for usually 350 and up. Both, I still think, relatively acceptable prices, direct to consumer. But if you want to make cheaper, you have to really focus on speed. So it's one of the things that we do. I can show you quickly maybe. And also let me know, guys, if I go over time, because I have a lot of stuff to show. But 10 hours for each foot. Yeah. So
It's okay. It's okay. Carry on.
Okay. Yeah. So the question was indeed, is it 10 hours per each pair or each foot? No, that's each foot. But the whole idea is that when you are using the printers that I'm describing for filament, these are much cheaper printers. So for instance, the FL Sun that we print this on is now on the market for 550 euros per printer, including VAT. So the whole idea is that you buy a series of printers, like you have a little farm. And then generally we print one shoe on each printer. I can, of course, put two shoes in one printer, no problem. However, if the printer fails at one point, then I have two shoes failed. It's the same basically when you have molding. That's also still where we put basically each mold is one shoe, not the pair so much. If something goes wrong in the machine, then at least you don't have a pair lost. And it's the same thing with printing. So I understand that people that come from the molding side think that 10 hours is very long. However, the main thing, of course, that you have to realize is that we don't need any molds whatsoever for this. So say I want to buy this shoe. I go on the website. I can show you that. Let me show this website. I go on the website of Fused Footwear. Here, for instance, is the website of Fused Footwear. They're based in Hong Kong, on one of the beautiful islands right outside of Hong Kong. It's one of my fellow countrymen, also a Dutch person. Here's the shoe, for instance, that I was just showing you. This one is a boot, so it's a bit more expensive. It's now $230. But he can print this, basically, since it's under 10 hours, he can print a pair for you in less than 24 hours. So I could order today, and he could ship out tomorrow, because he has multiple printers where he's at. You also have some cheaper ones. For instance, here, this one is a more simple men's shoe, quite clean. This one is 125. And then what you have to think about is that, okay, the machine's not expensive, so that's 5 something for each machine. So you can, for a few €1,000, you buy a farm, basically. You buy a multitude of printers. He has 5 printers, and he can make a living from printing his shoes at this moment. It's 5 printers. So with the cost of today, it's less than €3,000 for the printers. Then the material depends on what you buy. He buys it directly from China, so it's about €10 for a roll. So on the cost side, he would be anywhere between, depending on what you make, between 20 to 25, 30 max per pair, because the material is not so expensive. And of course, the machine prints it by itself. So that's actually still a quite good margin if you are then selling for 125. That is absolutely possible. But Zellerfeld, it's a bit different business model, but still really interesting, I find. Because what they basically did is ask different designers to design shoes for them in 3D that they would then print. And the designer gets a percentage, they get a percentage out of the margin. You can see these are more expensive, retail, 370, 250, 300, but this is also because it takes longer for them to print. And these people have decided to make their own printers. So they wanted their stuff, stop sharing for a second. They wanted their things to be really soft. And so if you want to do that, yeah, that takes a much longer time, but then everything is very soft and nice to the touch. So it depends on what strategy you are choosing. In the preparation conversation that we had before we started the webinar, we also talked, for instance, about some luxury brands that are starting. There are also some luxury brands working with Zellerfeld, for instance. They have made shoes for Moncler. Those can be a lot more expensive. And of course, brands like that do like this type of quality. Where if we look at the companies producing in China that really like the more interesting shapes, they will probably go for this method. So there are a lot of different things that we can achieve. What I think you should keep in mind also is that if we look at the printing quality and methods, so resin versus powder, is that these manufacturers sometimes make it seem that their way of printing is really fast. I remember being at the World Footwear Congress in Istanbul last year, December, and there was a trend forecaster who was talking about, here's this way of printing in resin with the carbon machine. It's holographic and it happens in 3 seconds. Well, absolute untrue. Because if you print stuff like this, yes, it goes sometimes, not always, a little bit faster than the filament. However, this requires after processing a lot. So the powder method, the resin method, the shoe does not come out of the printer ready. In our case, printing stuff like this, yes, comes out of the printer almost ready. Sometimes there's a bit of support material that I need to cut off, but this has hardly any after processing. And this has a lot of after processing. You can also see this has been sprayed. You can see the color comes off a little bit. So what those companies don't explain is that you might spend indeed an hour, half an hour on printing this, and then you have to cure them still for 24 more, and then do the dyeing, which would take several hours more. Question is, in general, is there a high return rate when people buy online versus in store? We don't have enough data on that yet. So generally, of course, online in general, regardless of printed, yes, has a high return rate. That's also why people buy 2 sizes. That's another thing why some of these companies are focusing more on custom to size. What you could do there is stay a little bit in the middle instead of doing one-on-one custom. Of course, if you do one-on-one custom with your customer and that person doesn't like your shoe and they send it back, well, then you have a custom shoe that you cannot sell to somebody else. What you could think about is use, again, the right information, big data. So many scanning companies now that have scanned a lot of feet to understand what people's actual shoe sizes and shapes are. And instead of just making length sizes with half sizes, you could say, okay, I have per size maybe 9 different varieties, because you don't have to have a physical last. I mean, the physical last we use for traditional, for knitted shoes in our case. We don't have to print last for our printed shoes. So you can have a huge series of digital lasts in stock. It doesn't cost you because it's not physical. And you can actually make the shoes much more custom to support. How do Fuse and Zellerfeld deal with returns? So in different ways. So Fuse does not offer custom. They do offer returns, mainly for the idea of recycling. That's also still early stage, and he has not had enough shoes returned yet to even do any serious type of recycling. But you can technically recycle this TPU. Same for Zellerfeld. You can, if it's a standard size, you can return. If it's a custom size, you cannot return. For printed shoes, where people have the option to specify a little bit more their sizes, return rates are much lower. So there's still return rates, but for online, we have seen return rates as high as 50%. For this, we are generally below 10. So that's pretty good. Yeah, there could only be, yes, exactly. Only a few supports in FDM. Yes, yes. What is the ideal position to print to avoid these supports? I would say come and follow a course with us. But I will, indeed. So what we do internally, what I advise any company to do, whichever type of printing you start doing, design for that type of printing. So whether you do resin, whether you do powder, whether you do FDM. So in our case, what is really important is that we actually do not want any support material. So in the case of Tellerfeld, they have 4 nozzles in the machine. 2 of them make supports so that you have everything clean everywhere. And but that's after processing. These supports need to be dissolved from that. In our case, the way we print, so here I can show you an example from, this is the one from Tellerfeld, from Fuse, sorry. Here you see the back end. So shoes are printed like this, not like that, like this. Why do we do that? So that we don't have any support in the front. A printer is like icing a cake. You cannot print in the air. So what you want to do, here we have a shoe. It's a failed print, but I'm showing it to you anyway. This is a shoe that prints 100% without support. It just prints like this without, and then think the top on top of it. This is from one of our current students. And why? Because the back part has been made flat. The inside, of course, not. The inside is still a heel curve for comfort. But this is done completely flat. Why? So I can put it on the plate just like this. Anything that is lower than 45 degrees is what we call an overhang, will create supports, and anything up from there doesn't. Ballpark rule. It can be a little bit more nuanced, but yeah, if you want to learn about this, come to our printing courses, because we teach for speed and no support, because we want to have shoes that can be produced industrially. So we are indeed focused on how can we go down to the 2-hour, 3-hour, really short printing times. Is there a 3D scan software that we can connect to the printer? For example, is it possible to scan a last and develop an outsole after a print? Yes, but you don't necessarily need to have a 3D scan software for that. Again, if you want to learn this, for sure, come follow training with us. That's more advanced. So essentially what we see also as the future of design is one of the things that we research a lot. And if any of you are interested, approach us about it. What we are developing are automated systems. So say that I have a scan of my foot. From there, I go straight, because of automated software, to a last for my foot, because the last will always be a different shape than the foot, because the shoe needs to fit on the foot. It needs to hold the foot, so it should not be the shape of the foot. It's not the same thing. And then straight into a design, and then straight into G code, what we call, which is the code that the printer needs. So does that exist? Yes and no. It's something that you generally would program in something like Grasshopper, Houdini, Blender procedural, Blender nodes. So it's possible, yes, but it's for people that are advanced in 3D design. So if you want to do that, of course, that's also another thing with anything related to printing. If you don't have a 3D design, you're not printing. So it's one of the bigger hurdles often for people also that come here, that they cannot make a 3D file. And I cannot tell a printer, well, here's my 2D sketch, and from there I need to create something. On the other hand, it's the same as with molding, because it's actually the final thing that I do want to show before we stop. One of the things that I think is the closest actually for our industry, and also requires 3D, is the same for everything, is the molding side. Here I'm showing you a 3D printed mold. This is for Simplicity Works in Alicante. And this was for the following shoe. Hold on a second. Let me go again to my share screen. That's this one. That's the camper Tosu. Am I sharing already? Okay. Hold on. Oh, wait. I wasn't sharing it. Here we go. Share the camper. Can you guys see this shoe? So the mold that I was showing you is actually for this whole bit that goes over the knitted upper. And this is a printed mold. And the same thing, for instance, goes for the, let me see, where do I have that shoe? maybe let me type that website in. For those of you that follow us online, you might have seen this. This is one of the consulting projects that we've been working on for a long time. This is a shoe that is made completely from 3D printed molds in a very innovative molding machine that molds it in just a few seconds. This is in full natural latex, and that's essentially this type of machine. So what you can see here, essentially, what it does, it prints in really simple, made with filament, very cheap molds. These are then copied with a vacuum forming method from packaging. So you copy the mold in foil, and then these foil molds that are only a few cents are then filled with in this case, a latex mixture. Now, this is one. Stop sharing. This is one of the many examples that there are of combining printing and molding. So in that sense, you will see that it's not about a competition between printing and molding. It's about the merger of printing and molding. I always tell people, don't print for the sake of printing, don't mold for the sake of molding. It's not about us feeling passionate about a certain method of making. It's about us feeling passionate about what you can achieve with that. How can we do things on demand, no stock, no waste, fully recyclable, local? Those are the things we want, and whichever technology is the best for that, we want to do. So here, what I just showed you in the shoe example is a combination of molding and printing. So that's very useful. Elastium, I hear a question on this. I can open the Elastium website if you want to know that, because yes, I know that. Let me see. Let's go to Elastium.io. Here we are. So Elastium is also FDM, so meaning printed with filaments. And I am not sure exactly which filament they print in, but I am assuming that it's pretty much either the exact same or a variety of what we use, and that is the Filaflex foamy. So a foaming filament. So this is also Filaflex foamy. It's a miniature shoe, but this is a filament that has a foaming agent in it. And so Elastium is an FDM technology. We see now more and more companies going to this technology because, to be honest, from a cost perspective, it has the best business model, hands down. So you have to think about a different way of doing business. You're going to do it on demand. What do they say? They say is 100% recyclable TPU foam. Yeah, okay, so that's TPU foamy. So indeed, this is also a TPU foam. So the materials that you use for FDM printing are thermoplastic materials. So that's also what the T in TPU stands for, thermoplastic polyurethane. So it means that this is of course, if you are printing something, you melt it and it starts extruding, you need to have a plastic that melts. So that's essentially, what's the name of the TPU filament? Oh, I can show you that. This is foamy filament. I can show you that. It's from Recreus. Let me see. Recreus. Let me see if it wants to load the website. Ah, here we are. It's this one. It's foamy. You have it in two densities, either 95A, so a little bit more stiff, or you have an 85A. In our case, I must say that this is the other one. This is the 95, and the other one, foamy. Let's see if it wants to open that. You have that's the other one. That's a softer foamy. That's about 85A. Here you can see shore hardness is from 78A to 51A. That's also something that a lot of people that are from the molding side don't always understand. That is because, stop sharing again. This is because depending on the temperature that you print on, the speed that you print on, and the size of your nozzle, the density of the eventual material will be different. So the smaller your nozzle, the softer the material comes out, the higher the speed, the softer. So you can tweak with that. But this is actually a very popular filament. We almost only print at this moment with foamy filaments. And this is the one that we use. Is from Recreus. It's the most footwear suitable one. They also, by the way, for those of you interested that are looking more industrial, we do also start doing that with pellets. So the granules. Not available yet on the website, but in a few months' time, probably yes, because we are developing a process with a printer for pellets specifically. How am I on time, guys? Because I can talk forever, but I don't know. We talked about an hour.
You are still fine. You are still fine. So we booked until 4:30. So you still have a little bit time. Let's get some time for the
questions. Yep.
Yes.
So 3D printed material versus standard aluminium tooling. What can we expect in terms of durability in the mold? Actually, we can also print metal molds. I don't have one here. It's a good question because, of course, when we're thinking of molding, the traditional molding, which will be in aluminium molds, there, of course, the goal is that ideally your mold can handle as many runs as possible, right? You want to aim for very high quantity because it's expensive to make one, so the more quantity that you can make, the better. Now, when we think of new business models in terms of making things on demand, which is actually what you want to do with printing, it means that the quantities at each given production time get lower. And that also, so in total, you might make the same quantity, but what we have now is that, say I produce in Portugal, in Asia, whatever, I want to produce in stock. I want to have, well, I remember from my time with Timberland, we didn't open a mold, we didn't make all the sizes until we had at least 10,000 pairs in order, rather more. So the whole idea is then, okay, we make all those at once, ship them out, and we have them in stock. That's not what you want to do with printing because you want to prevent all the excess stock. In the end, you might still make as many, but they will go in smaller runs. So that also makes it possible, also from the molding side, to start printing molds indeed with resin, with powder, even with the filament, because they don't have to withstand so many shots and so much pressure. So on the other hand, though, looking at metal mold printing, which also is very advanced by now, there you have a lot of fantastic new opportunities that are more expensive. It's not cheaper for sure. But for instance, I could do like concentric cooling channels so that I can demold my shoe much easier and have less blemishes. So in general, 3D printing is a very important aspect of molding. So I think also for the people that are in the molding sector, whether it's for your mock-up molds or eventually also your functional final molds, for those we will also find printing as an important tool for sure. Any other further questions? I'm thinking if I showed all my shoes. Almost, yes, yeah, maybe one to finalize that this is also to show you something completely different. This is a sample. Oh, good question, Danielle. Yeah, I'm getting to that. This is a sample by Stratasys. This is printed directly on top of textile. Very, very beautiful. And that actually relates really well to the question of Daniela. Is the material sustainable, recycled and recyclable? Some yes, some no. So from the FDM side, so the filament and the pellets, that's why we do so much of that here, because that is indeed 100% recyclable, as well as having a lot of varieties that are already 100% recycled. So Filaflex, one of the other filaments from Recreus, already has recycled, 100% recycled varieties. Any of these shoes that I have here that are made in full TPU with FDM, you can indeed chop them up, melt them down, either make new filaments or new pellets. So that's why we find this very important. And also what we will find, of course, over time is more bio-based TPUs. It's not possible yet to do 100% bio TPUs from a chemical perspective. Now, when we're looking at powder, or we look at resin, This is, by the way, also resin on top of textile. In general, these materials are not recyclable at all whatsoever, because these work in a different way. This is usually with the type of light, UV curing, LED light, and these are thermoset plastics. And not only that, when we're talking about a lot of these things, it's also solvent based. So meaning that it's actually with toxic chemicals. And yeah, we have an issue with that. So although having said that, on the resin side, there's a lot of research going on because, as you might know, resins we also find in nature. So I do expect within the coming 10 years that we will find more fully natural resins. In our industry, the difficulty is always that we need stuff that's flexible and bouncy and not rigid. And the weakeners that are required to make that happen chemically are usually the ones that are most harmful. So not all printed material is sustainable. No, not at all. So it's actually also a misconception a lot of the times. Some companies saying, yes, well, this is recyclable. No, it's not. The extra powder in the machine, yes, you can recycle. You cannot recycle this material. So FDM versus resin was the best for validation of prototypes. Oh, such good questions. I'm happy to answer if we still have time. For validation of prototype, it really depends on what you're looking for. If you are looking to have the material properties that you would get from molding, neither of them is good because they don't have the same material properties. If you're simply looking at getting a model that we can view so that we can see the shape of it, then I would say FDM because it's cheaper and then faster. If you want something more high res, or if you say I actually want to produce some molds to create mock-ups, then you would say resin. Did I try cork powder? So this is actually a really good question. Yes, I did, and no, I don't recommend. But the reason why I don't recommend is I'm not a fan of the let's mix plants and plastics approach. I was also approached by somebody very well meant who mixes EVA with cork. I find it horrific. And the reason why I think that is because from a recycling perspective, you can do nothing with that. So if I mix a natural material, which has specific recycling opportunities, with a plastic material, which has other recycling opportunities, I basically annihilate all recycling opportunities because they don't work together. So if I use cork powder, I will still have to have a binder to bind that. Now, if that binder is natural latex, then great. If that binder is a TPU or other foam-like materials, then from a sustainability perspective, for me, that makes no sense. So I know that in Portugal, there's a lot of cork being used. I think it's great. I would urge people to try and find plant-based binders. Indeed, for prototypes, from maquettes, resin, I would say. Is it possible to make a bag with your printer? Yes. Actually, it's not so much our printer, but because we have a multitude of printers, many different ones. I'm showing you here an upper of a shoe that we actually printed flat as a textile, but this is a fully stretchy, strong upper, which actually we can do really fast. This is like a Strobel, standard Strobel, but made in printing. Of course, yes, I could do bags with that. So the question is whether you would necessarily want to print an entire bag like in 3D like that. You can, but it's going to take you a lot of time. And then the question is that going to be an added value as opposed to a fabric bag? I now see my knitter just came in. We're going to start knitting some stuff. Then probably it will make much more sense for me to knit the bag than to print. You really have to understand what is it that you're trying to achieve. Would printing be the best method for that? Do you want it on demand? Do you want a shape that only a printer could achieve? Do you want a certain texture that only a printer could achieve? Do you want the bag to be indeed in a plastic-like material? Because that is for all types of printing, we're talking plastics. So that's really where you have to think. So can you make a bag? Technically, yes. Would it really make sense to make a bag? Probably not. I would probably say mold it, but or knit it or any of that, because it's large. So large things we can technically print, yes, but it takes more time, and only if you really want to do it on demand. So that's what I would suggest. I think we maybe round up. Did I forget anything, guys? Also from this, asking the CTCP people.
No, it was a really nice presentation. I'm seeing some familiar names here on the chat. So some of these questions I will show in a while some of the potentials, because so at CTCP we also have this our Fab Lab. So probably I can just make a quick introduction and show then some slides with the brand.
Before you do that, let me do one final thing, because I forgot something. I realized I want to announce our Footprint 3D event maybe before you do that. So for those of you, some of you might have been to our event last year, September. It's called Footprint 3D. It was the first ever event focused fully on digital manufacturing of footwear. So 3D printing, molding, knitting. As you might know, we've been through a change in our organization, in our team, and the event that was planned in September is now, and you are the first actually to hear this. This is the scoop for this event, is now moved to December. And let me quickly show you the page, and I can also show you the second. Here we are for 3D. Oh no, it's not. Oh, here we are. This is the right one. So let me also show you well, I'll send you the link in a bit. But our event's now going to be December 2 and 3 here in Barcelona. For all of you that I just saw in the chat that have a lot of technical questions on 3D printing, that want to see how this works, that want to experience that want to really understand more in depth, come to this event. It's an exhibition with different suppliers, different demos. We have a whole conference, networking, and the rest of the week, so 2 and 3 is Monday, Tuesday, then we have our actual event, and the rest of the week are going to be courses, different types of training. So this is definitely where you can get all the answers to your questions that you have. I'm also proud to say that we have more different Portuguese manufacturers. Also, if there's manufacturers among you that would like to present there, if you have printing technologies or knitting or molding and you want to have an audience to produce locally, approach me, because this is gonna happen in December. And I think everybody comes together to see these technologies.
Yes, I think I will be attending this year. So I was expecting for September, but I'm going on December. Also, another thing that we arranged with Nicolene. So some of these shoes that Nicolene showed to you, she will send to us. And just to make a general overview of our 3D printing journeys, I will probably be sharing my, how can I share? So, okay, partilhar. Okay, I don't know if you are seeing my website. Okay, so here, so this webinar with Nicolene, it's the first main event. It's not the first main, but you understood. Of our jornadas, the Impressão 3D, a little bit of Portuguese here. And next week, we are going to have a workshop where we will make sneakers combining the 3D printing with the leather and the traditional shoe construction. So it will be a 35-hour workshop I think it's already full. I'm not quite sure. But again, we will also have this one-stop shop events, one in Felgueiras, the other one at São João da Madeira, where everyone is invited to come and to see and ask every question that you have, all the doubts that you have about 3D printing. And then you will be able to see all the footwear that Nicolene will send to us. And at the end, in the final day, and I will invite you to register for this event, we will have a seminar where we will discuss the industrialization of 3D printing, not only on the footwear or starting with the traditional sectors, but then how can we translate this for the Portuguese footwear cluster, okay? So I think you can see all of this and then come to us to ask all these questions. So just to make a small introduction about myself and about the team, I am Pedro Duarte, and I'm a doctorate in 3D printing actually, and the focus of my PhD was the industrialization of 3D printing, and I've been working with 3D printing for most 10 years plus probably. So from ceramics to glass to metals to now a lot of polymers. And I'm responsible for the 3D printing area here at CTCP. So just to show some of the questions that you were asking here during the nice presentation of Nicolene, we also have some footwear already printed. This is a model of one of our designers. It was also printed in this position. It is with Filaflex as well. Regarding the foamy materials that Nicolene was asking, we also have in our exhibition, we also have some 3D objects printed with those materials. Actually, Recreos is sending some other materials just for us to have as demonstration objects. We also have the same thing as Nicolene was saying, playing with let me try to focus this. Playing with the slicer, actually, not on the design part of the object, but playing with the design. And also, regarding the back question, we also have a very nice upper, which you can see in our social networks. I think it was posted not yesterday, 2 days before. Yesterday, it was an insole. Today, there will be another video, and tomorrow, I think it will be the best one. So just be aware of that. Regarding the resins, we also have a flexible resin. So this is a footballer shoe, and it was printed at once. And also just for you to know this, because it was another question about the 3D scanner, these small slippers, they were done. It's not that it was a downscale, but it was after a scan of the foot of one of our colleagues. Then we draw on top of the file that we acquired with the scanner. And here you can see mainly the difference between this is printed with resin, and you can see it's quite a high detail in the object. And this one was printed with FDM, which you can see the defects of the layers. So it's quite a different technology for us. And just to finish, because that was the other question, the high heel footwear as well, and just the high heel. So this is, I think you can identify what this is showing, probably. So it's the Eiffel Tower. In Feist, which is the main project of this webinar, we are creating a pilot unit for prototyping and personalization. So we are acquiring a lot of technologies which will be open to the industrials of Portugal and everywhere, actually. Designers, everyone that wants to try something, to validate an idea, to create something, but they don't want to invest before being sure if it fits for you. So this is something that you can contact us and try to these objects and these materials. Let me just share with you again the presentation about, let me see. Okay. Okay. So starting just, so you have here my email and you can find out on CTCP and you can contact, you are free to contact me and or any other member of the team. They will be able to explain to you several things that were discussed today. So just to show you the main focus, or there are two different brands for 3D printing. The ones that were uh, uh, are already traditional in our sector and are looking for 3D printing as a new way to produce shoes, and others such as Zellerfeld, who were created based on the 3D printing. So I will be really, really quick, but just to show you the broad range of brands that are already doing something with 3D printing. So here there's the Vaporfly Elite Fly print of Nike. They were printing the uppers such as this one using the same process, and then they were mounting on their sneakers. Here, this one, the pick tracks, or I don't know exactly how they call this, but it was made with a selective laser sintering. So there's a laser which melts the powder for the material in the powder form. This is mostly for validating the prototyping, not just for producing. And then there's the most well-known brand using 3D printing, the Futurecraft for the of Adidas, where they use the carbon printers, such as Nicolene just said. And this is it's based on photopolymerization of resins, but Carbon developed a really, really nice process where it increases the speed, the printing speed, and they were able to pointing to the mass production market, which is quite nice, although it's still quite expensive, I think, if you are not looking for a massive production. So regarding the business side of the 3D printers, you, as Nicolene said, you should really know what you are aiming for, and then you can choose printers suitable for you. So the same thing as footwearology, as Nicolene said, we here we have printers from 100 euros up to 5,000 euros, and they will do several different things. So you should try to find out which one is most suitable for us. That's something that we also do under the project of Digi for Fashion, helping companies to find out what is the most suitable technology and materials for what they are aiming to do with 3D printer. Here we have New Balance, where they are printing outsoles as well. With Formlabs, this one is based on a resin printer. So as Nicolene said, from the sustainable point of view, it's not the best idea, but it's quite durable, and for prototyping is really, really nice. And you are finding a lot of new resins, and we are probably going towards the sustainability also with the resins, right? Such as the same thing as Nicolene said. Here in more detail, what the Under Armour is also doing. And here Puma plus Porsche, they made this nice model for the 3D printing. And then last year, I think it was in 2023, in the Paris Fashion Week, there were several models presented by well-known brands. This one is from Reebok. They were using a powder-based technology and then a dyeing process for this model. And then some of the most traditional brands, such as Dior. I will put this video. I don't know if you are able to listen, but then you can find this quite nice model. This one was made in a powder-based technology, the same networking that Nicolene was showing to you. And it's quite nice because they were able to print several models with the same structure, a derby shoe, and then they have a boot. So here we are seeing the removal from the shoe from the powder bed, which is one of the technologies that we are looking to acquire for us. So right now we have two different technologies, main technologies for 3D printing, several different variations of the same process. So one thing that I don't recall Nicolene talking about was the multi-material process. So it's quite nice. I really agree with Nicolene because sometimes we are mixing materials when we are looking for recycling, and that's probably not the best idea. But if you are using the same material but with different shore, for instance, let's say we are using a TPU, a 30D, a 40D, and a 95A, and you can combine this in the same process of printing in the same object, you will take a lot on the performance of the object. So it's another approach to the 3D printing. Gucci, this one was new for me. I was not aware that they were also looking for 3D printing, and they made a model. I think they made a limited edition of 20 pairs, and on one of the most well-known boutiques. Then Louis
Can I say
Vuitton.
something there, Pedro?
Yes.
Pedro, can I say something there?
Sure.
So I'm really proud that you show this shoe, because this actually is a shoe, one of the shoes that came out of the previous Footprint 3D event. Gucci's team was there. They came to Footprint 3D to understand more about printing because they were in preparation for this. And so this is indeed the shoe they made. So interesting to see those brands also coming to stuff like that.
Yes, so I'm not aware. I think it's not fully 3D printed. I think it has some 3D printed components.
The midsole,
okay.
Yeah.
And then they have
Okay.
They have a recycled polyester, I think, on the upper by knitting or something like that. So it's a quite nice idea, and from the point of view of 3D printing is amazing. So, and I'm glad that these big brands are looking for the technology as well, the same way that we are looking. So it can be for whole footwear, it can be for components. You just need to be sure what the things that you want to do with the technology. So Louis Vuitton as well, they launched the LV Cobra. This was with the Zellerfeld technology, I think, as well. So I don't know if they use really a partnership between both companies, but it was with Zellerfeld that they produced this model.
Yeah, so it's a real partnership.
Yeah, okay. So there's a lot of partnerships usually between the 3D printer manufacturers and the big brands, Carbon plus Adidas, HP, and Nike. And then Louis Vuitton also did something that we truly believe it's not only for the production, but for the product development and to support the production. So on the left side, you can see some stand-ins printed and plated with gold before it was really for the mass production. And on the right side, you can see a back shape that they used a mold to make it, a mold made in PETG. So it's the same material, almost the same material as our water bottles, but because it has a good heat resistance, they are using this for this process. And then Nicolene already told about Zellerfeld, so this is some of the new models that they are producing. Another important thing that I really want you to retain is something that Nicolene said, which is you start to taking the most of 3D printing when you are designing for 3D printing. So don't think that you will do the same thing, the same kind of designs for injection molding and then for 3D printing. They are not replacing each other, they are complementing each other. So that's the main idea to take home. So another brand, this is a little bit more specialized, Athos, they are using 3D printing for climbing shoes. And the thing that I recall from the companies is that most of the people were saying that either the regular shoes were too loose or too tight for their feet while they are climbing. And because they are doing this personalized for each even foot, not feet. So each foot they will take a photo using the Athos application, and it will be tailor-made for the climber. Finally, Fuse, again, already Nicolene showed to you. So I just took some of the images from their website, and it's quite nice as well. So I think we have a nice overview here. I don't know if there's more questions. Something that I want to say is, so follow us or on our website and see all the program for Jornadas. We will have several events and we will have a lot of objects that you can try, you can touch, you can feel. Again, strategies. We also have some strategies. I think you can see it. It's our logo. I don't know. It's quite a difficult one, but this is again, this is another technology, really, really impressive, and it's being used in the fashion industry for a while. There's a lot of applications in Hollywood, so it's just time that we can bring it to the footwear as well and bring it a little bit down for everyone. I don't know if anyone has any question. I think I just said everything that I had to say.
I think it was super informative, so I think everybody should just think about all the things we said and go see you guys, especially everybody in Portugal can of course go see you guys live and then see the shoes and see everything there. And yeah, looking forward to do more stuff together, to also see you guys at the Footprint 3D, see everybody who was also here at the event, and yeah, and of course to see the applications applied in the industry.
Yes. So something that I think it was Diogo also asked you about the metal printing. So there's something also with the metal 3D printing where you can print some ornaments for footwear, for luxury brands. You can take a lot of value with 3D printing. I think we are waiting for some parts, metal parts come from Race 3D. So Race 3D is betting on metal 3D printing, which is also a quite nice idea, and we will have some objects here as well. So everyone who wants to check with us, you can just come.
I think also definitely there, if people are looking at that, so that's actually the one thing that I do miss in the Gucci shoe, not just the hardware, but the idea that, of course, I mean, I don't necessarily need a 3D printer to print buckles or studs or whatever, because we can buy them in bulk easy. If you do stuff like this, indeed think about customization. It's not so much about having everything specific to each customer, but I know you have this project of Nutella where each of the jars has a different label on it, right? Slightly different, and this is the same thing you can do with printing. So we had suggested when Gucci, for instance, came to our event, we made like with AI, a little booklet for each of the brands. And we had showed there like Gucci loafer with the little metal bit on the front, with an idea where each of those little metal pieces would be slightly different, still looking the same at first sight, but slightly different, so that each consumer knows the one that I have is unique and it's the only one, and it doesn't cost you anything extra whatsoever. And I really hope that companies start thinking about those ideas, to use software to do that. These are things that we also stimulate a lot, because otherwise you indeed get the discussion, oh yeah, but I can buy this same buckle or ornament for half the price if I buy it from a molding facility. So you really have to start experimenting, because I agree with you, metal printing, if you go to shows for jewelry printing, it's fantastic, the stuff that you can do. I'm waiting for all those people that want to do high heels, for covers for heels, ornaments, all this stuff that is now not being touched, but is absolutely possible.
Jewelry was actually one of the first industries to look for 3D printing because of the lost wax process. It was quite nice, and the finishing that they need to have for precious metals was the best match with 3D printing, with the wax 3D printing. Was really nice.
Totally, yeah. It's a big market, so for people that want to see that, there's a big show called Form Next in November, which in Frankfurt, which is the largest printing show for any kind of printing. Not so much footwear, but any kind of printing. So people that want to see that, it's beautiful, the stuff that you can buy, and we just need shoe people to start thinking about how you can do that for footwear. So,
yes, I think I saw, because it's I think it's the Rapid plus TCT event in the United States, and I think I saw for the first time something related with footwear on this fair, and it is one of the biggest fairs in 3D printing worldwide, and it's starting now appearing something from footwear and leather goods sector. So it's quite nice to see that.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. I will actually see that I get some of these people also for Footprint 3D to show and to maybe do some projects on actual footwear ornaments and fastenings, because it's especially for the luxury industry. I mean, also the person that was asking for bags, I can imagine, for instance, that we make shoes with a certain buckle and there's a handle on the clutch bag or whatever that is the same, and then the rest of the bag might still be indeed complete leather textile, because not everything is suitable for printing. But here's where we can see those interesting combinations.
Yes, exactly. I don't know if Florbella wants to say anything else. Let me just check if there's any new questions.
Not yet. I hope people are still there.
No, yes.
Just want to add that they have a Portuguese company called Mind Technology.
Oh yeah, 3D software.
And so they have these CAD systems dedicated to footwear engineering and design. And what I would like to add to what was being said is that in this project, we are developing this software. Mind is developing this software, so we can take the models directly to the 3D printed. So it's like an improved version. So we can use that software to actually print the models, the prototypes, which is really good as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, just wanted to add that and to stay tuned on our website and social networks to see more updates on that.
Yeah, that's also, of course, a new development. Yeah, we do a lot in AI as well. We have done our first course now 3 weeks ago, where we generated material shoes fully in 3 AI, straight for printer. It's not perfect yet, but that's
quite nice. Also, so because we were talking about software, and it's quite nice that the software houses are also looking for 3D printing. The traditional ones, they were looking for CAD just for design, right? But even Rhino, so the last update, then the Rhino 8, they have the shrink feature, which is a really nice feature, because it turns out to be useful for 3D printing, and you don't need to be so careful with your tight design for watertight for 3D printing. You
closes
can just,
your mesh.
You can just make the same way that you are doing for several years, and at the end you just wrap the file and send it for 3D printing.
Okay, well.
Okay, thank you.
So if there is no more questions, I think we can call it. I would like to thank you very much, Nicolene. It was a pleasure to have you. It was a big contribution, really nice sharing. And also thank Pedro as well. And of course, all the participants that were with us today. Stay tuned for more updates, and we are looking forward to see you in the future.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicolene.
Bye.
Bye.